We're a True Mental
Oh
Health.
my God. Hello.
We got this.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Welcome to True Mental Health with your lovely hosts. I'm not even going to say
That's
our
us.
names today because I always fuck it up. Uh,
Who are we? I don't know.
so, like we are always kind of winging it with topics, and both of us are facilitating and introducing more business classes and programs into the world. And so I was like, what if we talk about, something about questions? Because last week we were like, how the hell do you ask a question?
Mhm.
And talk about questions in business, because I know you and I both, this is kind of how we create business, is we choose and we ask questions, and then we choose and we ask questions, and that's how our business gets created. So
yeah, I was looking at like, how do you market that? Ask questions. Ask your business fucking questions, okay?
well, I think last week's conversation is so key. And if you guys didn't catch
Yeah.
it, I swear to God, we are going to get this put up into a podcast one day. But until then, YouTube,
Yep, and here
just
on
like
IGTV.
turn the video off and listen to it, because the video was terrible. But it was that, like, how do you even ask a question? What is a true question? So add that to this conversation. My gosh, what if we started with like, okay, how are you playing with this in real time, present day?
So much. So I'm really getting just, this whole idea of question is to, create more ease, right? If we're seeing how it's related to mental health, for me to get out of conclusion, get out of judgment, which is going to activate my nervous system, right? So this is kind of my whole process. I'm asking questions lately because I'm shopping for a house. We're moving to like north of Dallas area, Frisco area. And what a process, because I'm really tapping into like the energy of the market. There's a lot of frenzy here in the US, and a lot of multiple offers going way over asking, and just you can just feel it. It's so palpable. And so I've really set my intention to detach from that. What could I create here? What if I didn't have to be at effect of the market? What could show up? And so I had to be pretty aggressive with myself and asking these questions, because my nervous system was like nervous. It's like, see, house, and like, but that also facilitated so much ease when I could walk in and be like, is it this? Yes or no? It was like, nope. Okay. I could just turn around and be done. So it just facilitates such speed with it.
Okay. Now, one of the things I think is worth exploring a little bit more is that, one, you asked a yes no question, and number two, you followed it quickly. That's maybe the three things.
Yeah. Well, and there was some times where I was like, oh, maybe I should just make the pleasantries with, the selling agent who's there. You know what I mean? How can you know that fast?
Yeah, and actually, you and I had a lot of those conversations in the beginning of like, you can really know that fast, because like one of us would be twisted in something, and I'd be like, well, let's just ask a yes no question, and then we'll get the awareness. And it is kind of jarring in the very beginning to get that you can get an awareness on whether something's going to work, whether it's for now or the future, instantaneously. You can just know. And so I think this is the thing, like, we kind of rob ourselves of constantly with overthinking. And I see this happen in business more than anything, which to me is like, that's the sign that you're going down the drain into a land where you're not going to thrive. That's where mental health does not live. It's like overthinking, worrying, stressing about things, controlling things into existence. I mean, these are all things I've definitely done. Maybe you've done it.
Massive control.
Yeah. And it's literally like my body hurts. So I've been creating this business for, I don't know, actively probably 5-6 years. And in the middle of creating my business, I've also like changed multiple things in my life. So there's just been so many different ups and downs. But I had a year where I was like really intense. Like, business is like exponentializing this year. And so I just like went for it, and I was just working constantly, which is okay on the one hand, because I really, really do enjoy working.
Yeah.
But I was also doing this thing where I was gonna force or control these results that I wanted into existence. And by the end of that year, I had like carpal tunnel in my wrist. I was wiped. I was just tapped. And there was a lot of joy in the middle of all of that too. But the cumulative effects of like not asking my body anything, not including my body, which is also like living as the question, is like, who or what can I choose today? And sometimes that could have been my body, but I never asked.
Yeah.
And so like the effects of not really including and not asking were just really hard on me. And that next year I made a really big demand of myself and I asked a question. I'm like, what would it take to have double the revenue with half the effort? I just was like,
my favorite question.
What would it take to have double the revenue with half the work? And so that next year, I think I did like a third of the work. And my revenue didn't double, but I did a third of the work and it went up still. And I was like, okay, well, this is interesting because apparently when you ask a question, something changes. So don't ask that
apparently,
question.
don't ask it. No, I love that. Just because I'm seeing how I had a parallel experience where I was just like working really hard to make things happen and then kind of made the demand of relaxation because I was like, this is not sustainable, nor is this fun. I mean, same. I like to work a lot, but not in the energy of like have to or force to make something happen. I'm really stuck on something you said earlier regarding like asking the question, and it can be so jarring how fast it is because it's like it's almost like we don't always have the willingness to want to hear the information that's coming through the download. It's like, but that doesn't match what I've already decided and concluded is right, so I can't. And then we reject it. And then
well, what awareness does is it opens up the possibilities and it opens up you to the possibilities. And there are so many instantaneous possibilities and there's so much instantaneous information we can get. And so I use questions two ways. I use it one to get an awareness, maybe three, I don't know. I use it to get an awareness of the future that my choice will create, which is a totally other conversation. Like if I choose this, what's the future like? Is one of the ways I use questions to get a sense of that. I use questions in another way to get just the information of like timing of things. Like, is this for now or later? But that comes from an awareness of how I function, which I think a lot of us don't know, which is that I get awareness of all time. Time's a construct. Like we made that up. So past doesn't exist. Present is just like, okay, right this second. And future is a possibility. But somewhere we've made time much more different than real. Yeah. So I'll use it to get a sense of timing because all of that blends together for me. And I know that. And then I also use questions to generate new possibilities. Like what would it take for with ease, so that the universe can contribute something to me and I don't have to work so fucking hard.
Yeah.
And so also like I'm contributed ideas and energies and like, it's just this invitation to this infinite universe to make my life easier. But I get that it all comes from like, whatever it takes, I'm going to have ease. Like,
yeah. And kind of what I'm getting to is like, there's with the questions, it's almost like you're out of definition of how the thing shows up or what it looks like. Cause I was thinking also with like the houses, I was doing the same thing, asking questions with like pricing or, whatever the things you put on your offer and whatnot and all those numbers and choosing. And I was just kind of like, well, what's going to create the greatest here? Not what's going to get me the house. Right. Because if I've decided this is the house and I can only have this one, then I was like, versus what else is possible? What if there's something greater out there? I'm like, universe, this house or better, show me. And then tell, kind of like what price will create the greatest. And it was like just paying them in $10,000 increments or whatever. And then I was just picking what popped.
Yeah. Well, this is where again, this is such a mental health conversation because it's like when you box yourself into like, I have to get this particular result, you then have to bend and fold and staple and mutilate yourself to fit whatever it is you've decided is required to get that result. And so always the person that loses is you. And when and it was a really interesting, I had an interesting process on many levels when I first found Access. But one of the things that was palpable in my world is that I would get fixated on a particular way something had to be done. And it's hard for me to even remember this now, but looking back, this was a huge thing. I get fixated and then literally like be like almost like so blind to anything else that there wasn't anything else. And then when somebody would say something, this is in the beginning where I was starting to kind of come out of this incredible amount of control I'd been doing and coping and survival, starting to get that there was another way to live. and somebody would say something and it would literally like pop open the box in my head, and I'd be like, oh. And I remember actually saying something to myself once very consciously. I was like, I need to remember that there's always other ways of things occurring. Like, I want to remember this. I want to remember this. I want to remember this. Because somewhere in my world that had gotten like beaten out. Like there just was only ever one way. And I mean, if you look at the way kind of we're raised, or how I was raised in religion, I guess in particular does this, where, you know, it's like, there's one way to God. There's one way for this. There's one way for this. It's understandable to get how we could like come to a conversation like this very, very, I don't know, trained or, you know,
programmed. Yeah.
And it's like, so I really wanted to remember, because it literally just wasn't in my world that there could be multiple ways for things to show up. Like, and so that may be where some of you guys are starting, you know, of, and this is where I think, you know, last week's conversation is such a gift, because you can start with one question and go, well, then what else is possible that I haven't considered? Like, just add that one thing, and that's going to like pop the lid off of wherever it is you've just like driven towards a particular thing, you know, and not even considered that there could be anything else. So I love what you said.
It reminds me of like, what's that experiment? I don't know if it was like with jumping fleas or something, but like some sort of insect that jumps to like 6 feet naturally. But then if they're put in a box that's like at 3 feet, and then they just start learning, well, that's the limit. That's the ceiling. That's the ceiling. And you take the ceiling off, and then they're still jumping.
Yeah.
And like I was... Right. And so it's like, how much do we impose that on ourselves? And I saw that I was like, okay, all of a sudden I was like, I want a pool. I really love a pool. And so I'm going to look at pool houses. But I realized, well, again, that's a conclusion, because it's like, well, what else is possible? Like, what if somewhere had an amazing yard and I could put in a pool, or we didn't need a second car? So it'd be very easy to, you know, put funds towards a pool if we were close enough to my husband's work. So, but having that option open, being in question of what would it take to have a pool, doesn't mean the house already comes with a pool. Do you know what I'm saying?
No. And the other thing that's interesting about this that I don't even think you and I have talked about is that your awareness. So even if you like kind of stepped back and looked at, okay, what energies, if you stepped back and looked at the energies that a pool added to your life, to your business, and you were like, oh, that, you know, a lot of times we think that when we see something or a clothing piece or a car or a color or a house or something, that it's that particular specificity that, oh, that's the thing, you know, and so we get hooked on the particular, the specific. When if you even looked at like what energies did having a pool add to your life and living, you might actually get a whole broader spectrum of how all those energies could show up in your life that you really haven't considered, including a pool, but not exclusively limited to a pool. And this is where, when we exclude the information that we're actually aware of energy, we speak energy, that everything has energy, then we're kind of crippled, because we then get hooked on the what it looks like rather than the what it be like, which the what it be like is what allows our, you know, our life and our business to expand. And this is where it kind of circles back around to question of like, question opens you up to what it be like.
Yeah. And it's like, you can't grab onto the specifics of it, because it invites energy, a vibration, a sensation that you're having, that it's almost not like, well, I want this very specific sink and poles in the kitchen, and that's it, right? You know, it's just kind of like, well, what if something else was possible, and how everything came together? Or what if the yard wasn't just a pool, but this like amazing oasis of like plants and, you know, a speaker system that sounded like a resort? You know, it's just like all those things that come together to fuel what it is. I mean, I just getting that it's like, again, it's like hard to even put words to, because it's like the question just creates something that I can't even put my head around. Like I can't even
because it's not a head reality. You literally cannot put your head around. It actually takes you into the being, knowing, perceiving, and receiving reality. So if you're trying to get into your head with it, you're trying to fit a consciousness invitation into a linear construct. And that's why it doesn't work, because you can't get your head around it. So the only thing you can do with questions is add them to your life and then see what occurs. And which to me in the beginning was same here. I was like, I really struggled with that, because I love being in my
Give me the answer. I'm supposed to get a result.
So I had to practice something different. And the interesting thing is you can use questions I would use questions to stimulate different possibilities in your world.
Yeah.
It's different though, looking at stimulating different possibilities and trying to achieve a result. And that's where you kind of got to look at where you're functioning from with this, because trying to achieve a result can occur. And you've got to look at, is it holistically caring for you in all respects, or are in somewhere in going for this particular result? Are you losing you in some way? Are you losing care for your body? Are you losing, have you considered all of you? So what I find the question, choice, possibility, reality does is it includes all of me. I get to include my body, the way I want to live, the way I want to have my relationships, the way it includes everything. All of my awareness, all of the universe. It's an inclusive universe. And so, so you can stimulate more money in your world. What would it take for more money to show up with Total Ease? I just did it again yesterday, 2 days ago. You know how I get private clients? You know my technique?
Yeah. It's very secret.
This is how I get private clients, you guys. I use a big funnel. No.
Yeah.
I go, what would it take for more private clients to show up with these? Literally within 2 to 3 days, I have somebody messaging me buying a package. Literally.
You have the fast pass on the questions.
Yeah. So I did it again. So I've been busy writing my first book. So I'm like 32,000 words in. We're like almost to the 50,000.
Wow, that's so
exciting.
Cool.
And I've really had my head down. Like that's kind of where a lot of my energy is going. So I just was like, what would it take for more private clients to show up with these? Remembering again, I can ask. Sure enough, yesterday somebody booked an hour session, which in my, just like I don't even know her. I don't know how she found me. She just booked it. There's $750 sitting in my account. This is the thing about questions is like, if you remember that everything supports you, you can invite it to support you.
Yeah. Well, and what I'm getting from what you said earlier, it's like kind of like the result is the happy byproduct, but that's not what I'm going for. It's like versus going for the stimulation of possibilities and kind of almost like allowance for things to show up.
Totally. And it's like, I want to kind of throw back to what you said. You said something, say that again. Can you start where you said?
Hopefully.
Nope.
Okay, so the results are a happy byproduct. So I'm saying like, I'm not going
and
for
you can still have what you want. So this is the thing. It's like this is the thing I think is so interesting to talk about, because it's like, you got to kind of look at if you want to have something different. So let's say, I don't know, I've talked about this so much, like, are you going for it? Because you'll get frustrated. And I'm like, well, are you going for results? And you're like, yes. And I find myself doing it too.
Yeah. It could be like social media numbers or a financial result or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta, if it's not really working the way you want, or if you're like getting bent out of shape, this is the thing. You're gonna get indications that you're bending and twisting yourself by how it's affecting you, kind of, the symptoms that are showing up. So if you're not thriving, if you're like not ease, joy, and glory, you're doing something else. So it's like, okay, so what are you doing this for? And once you start to again, a question. So you start to kind of dive into what you're doing because you've decided you need to do it. But you kind of break it apart and go, well, what are you doing this for? Like, what is it you want to achieve? And then you kind of drill down. Well, I'm doing it for this. Okay, but for what reason? Well, I'm doing it for this. Well, for what reason? When you really allow yourself to kind of get down to what's truly motivating you, it's very likely that what you're really wanting to create is like life worth living, or changing the world, or freedom to choose, or a bigger menu of choice with more money. Yeah. That's the energy. And that's what we miss out on, and we don't get to function from when we decide that we're going for a particular result. We see something that we want to have, and then we go to a conclusion about what it's going to take to have it. And then we try to force that conclusion into existence. And then the person that gets mutilated in the process is always us. And it doesn't work as well. So it's like, you can work this process kind of different directions. You can like remember to start asking more questions. Yes. You can also kind of pay attention to where you're not really thriving in your life and in your business, and ask that some more questions. It's like, what am I trying to achieve here? Is it working? Is another great question.
It's funny because it's like so simple, but yet how much do we just like, is it working? Well, you know what I mean? We don't even ask it. We don't even think to ask it.
And really, and I have to be honest, this takes a level of vulnerability with yourself, because you really do have to be willing to kind of engage with you as somebody who is out there just creating. You have a brush on the canvas and you're like slapping paint around, and here you are. And now you got to step back and kind of like, okay, how's this going?
Well, okay. And would you also say that like, it's not like, okay, you ask questions today and then you're good. You're good for the rest of the year or the rest of your business. It's like, no, what I noticed, especially with the house stuff, things every hour were changing, or I just kind of stayed tapped in to one. And then all of a sudden it kind of took a small left turn. I was like, huh, something changed. Not sure yet. But it's like, and so it's like asking a question again, because if I just stuck with my first awareness, then you know what I mean? I'd already be like locked into that again, like kind of that tunnel vision versus continuing.
Yeah. Well, you would have taken your awareness and made it into a conclusion.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm very good at that.
Me too. I've done it so much. Even this morning, I was talking to my partner and I'm like, that thing I said to you yesterday, that was asshole thing to say. I was like, was it light? I'm like, I'm going to go empower him to look at the energy of what I'm saying, because sometimes I lie. I'm like, that thing I said to you, was it light? And he looked at it. He's like, no. I was like, I lied. I do that sometimes, and I'm sorry. Right? So it's like, it was bugging me so much because I was like, oh, me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like we have all this power and we use it for creative, generative things, and we also destroy others and ourselves with it sometimes. So
fun.
I forget where I was going with that, but you said something really great. Yeah, well, trying to go backwards is like impossible.
Yeah, right. It really is today. I'm like, already on to like 10 more topics.
Oh, I think you were talking about like, so we don't ask it. Oh, okay. We don't ask just one question, like one and done.
Right. Yeah.
Here's the question you ask, and then that's all you have to ask.
Yeah.
No, actually, the point is the key to the freedom. So this is one of the keys to freedom, is living as the question. The freedom comes from staying engaged. And that's actually what living as a question is. Like you're just engaged with all energies. One of the things they talk about in the Access Foundation class is like, can you ever, if you're present, can you ever have a boring life? And so when you look at presence is like, this is an example of presence, is like feeling your feet on the floor, lowering all your barriers, feeling your hands on your body, and now pushing your head out and not thinking. Now you're present. Now, does it require you to sit there and put your hands up? No, you can be just as present walking on your phone and everything. But most of us take ourselves out of being present. Anytime you're judging and thinking, worrying, doubting, stressing, anxiety, any of those.
I don't knowing.
Yeah. That's you not being present. And that's really how we're taught to function. So what this does is this returns us to being present and really going, what else is possible? And the moment you truly ask that, you are engaged. Now you, the being, have engaged with all the elementals and the molecules in the universe, and everything is like, it's like stands alert. As soon as you're there, all the molecules go. And this is quantum physics. Like you can go study this. Like, What the Bleep Do We Know Anyway is a great documentary. A Happy Pocket Full of Money is this incredible resource on explaining like the science behind this. This is how molecules function. So the moment we become a question, which is like, all molecules go, and you observe it and it changes on your behalf. It just doesn't show up the way you think, because that's not how molecules function.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, I'm getting so much more awareness of like how I was functioning this time with house shopping. Like 5 years ago, we purchased a condo in Chicago. And I remember just at that time, all I had was like, is this light or is this heavy? Is this light or is this heavy? I didn't really have the access to the questions. And so although it's still,
but I want to stop you there, because that's a great tool.
That's
also really great. That's a great show. So don't discount that.
It's true. It's where I started though, right? It's kind of like the set.
But it's everything. I mean, can I pause there for a second?
Yes,
because you just rolled right over it as if it was nothing. And I think that start there, everybody. Yeah. You always know what's light and what's heavy, but we're not taught to put our attention on it. So like even this morning's conversation, he was in the shower. That's why I keep pointing. I walked in there and I was like, that thing I said to you, was that light or heavy? He hadn't looked at it yet.
Yeah.
So as soon as he looked at it, he's like, that was heavy. I'm like, yeah, I lied. But so epic tool.
Yeah. Next week. Light and heavy.
Then,
yeah. And then, so I guess I was just kind of seeing it, the evolution of the process, and how I was kind of just like more green with the energy. And then this time just being able to have more access to when it shifted. like in between.
The subtleties.
Yeah. Versus being like, this one's light. Okay. It's light. We're you know, I mean, I have more access to being more questioned now from practicing it.
And I also like I've been in a lot of talk to the entities classes in this last month, a lot of energetic classes actually. And one of the things I'm recognizing is that, and I'm putting this in the book also, that light energies are subtle energies. They're not obvious. They're subtle, they're feathery.
Yeah.
And so if you look at even like how psychology works or the mental health field works, we put all our attention on the heavy, dense energies. It's like if there's sadness, depression, anxiety, you know, nervous system dysregulation, that's where our attention goes.
Yeah.
So we're train ourselves every single day, and we're taught to not like the feathery energies actually just aren't even talked about really.
Well, kind of how we just like dismiss it. I was like, well, yeah, just light heavy. I don't know.
I was like, no, go back. That's the beginning.
But it is so subtle because it's just like, it is a whisper. And I get it, you know, if we are not calm enough or present enough to tune into it, then we'll just totally miss it. It'll fly right by.
Yeah. And also it's like adding these, and it's like adding to your world people that are actually talking about this also, because like if you look out in the world, the only things that are being shown on TV, you don't have a television series without drama. You cannot have a movie without a conflict. You know, like every single thing that we are just surrounded by these are the presentation of dense energies and the resolution of dense energies. We are very rarely shown something that's like, hey, if you stimulate and you pay attention to the subtle energies, you will have access to a world of possibility most people around you don't have.
Yeah.
So it's like in your business, like as you're creating in the world, like how do you use this? How do you lead yourself forward with subtle energies when most of the people out there are like, do this dense thing and this feeling thing and this conclusion, and you'll get these results. You know, what is that practice?
Look at the problem and fix it.
Present the solution to the problem and the pain that people are in so that they can get that you are the solution to their problem. And I'm not saying like none of that is effective at creating sales, because God knows we've bought tons of stuff. It's really just looking at like kind of what's the world you want to live in personally, what's the world that you are creating in the world, you know, and what's going to be the pathway or the way forward with instituting that, actualizing that world in the world as a business, as a living, as an impact, you know. Get started.
Someone asked to explain light and heavy. Does that sound like a next show, maybe potentially?
Yes, haven't we done one? We can do another one. Light and heavy part 2. I
sense we'll like say different things this time about it.
Okay, we'll do that next week, you guys. We'll do all light and heavy stuff. Well, we'll talk about it next week. Yeah. It's the first. It's the first tool, access consciousness tool, that I was ever given in an email, even, and so I can tell that story in totality like next week. But it's like kind of one of the very first thing that Access gives you, and it just starts with like, hey, what's true for you is light, and what's not isn't, and the other stuff's heavy, and that's not true. So when you start to really apply that to every single thing in your life, what I found is like 99% of what I had thought was real and true for me simply wasn't, which leads you to a question like, well, if that's not true for me, what is?
That was so empowering, because for me, it was always about like, well, if someone else says something, then they must be right. Not what do I know, what's light, what's heavy. And now it's just so different, because then when I hear someone, when normally I would go into like, they're right. I'm like, that doesn't feel good. Like, okay, that's not true for me. What else could I choose? You know?
That just stabbed me. Maybe that's not true. Ow. Instead of trying to find out where they're right and I'm wrong, I think I'm just going to leave that right there on the shelf.
And walk
that
away.
Is a whole show.
My human self. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. So your business program starts this week, yeah?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm having a free taster on the 19th. So you can sign up, link in my bio. It's an EFC taster. So you can kind of get a little vibe. We're going to talk a lot about like using questions in business and kind of starting to follow the energy, so you get an idea of that. So we have a taster, and then we start next week.
Awesome. And if you guys want more access consciousness, like full on just an access class on business, I have a intro class on May 25th called Crafting Your Empire. Crafting Your Empire. And then right after that in June, I have a 4-day Business Done Different masterclass with all access consciousness processes and tools. And then right after that, I'll be starting a 6-month mastermind. So there's
like busy at all.
No, I don't. No. Why be busy when you could just be ridiculous?
Busy.
Yeah, cool. And so you guys get to kind of come discover like what's going to add to your life. And this is where I'd use a question. That's all. Look at the different choices and go, hey, what will my life be like in 5 years if I choose this? And get a sense of each of the things. And that's going to start to teach you and substantiate in your world your ability with energy. Such a gift. So
love it.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Until next time. See you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.